Hello again. Today I want to talk about the concept of the self. And at the beginning I thought, okay, I can talk about this concept like any other concept. But the problem is that with this concept I found immediately a number of elements that there are cultural. For example, in English, we use the word self, and the psychology is based in this dichotomy between the ego and the self. Nonetheless, in Spanish, you use for the word ego the word yo, and for the word self the word yo as well. So, from the beginning, we have this situation. If we add on top of that we belong to a Greco-Roman culture, a Judeo-Christian culture, that adds a number of things. In terms of the Greco-Roman culture, we can go to see where comes the concept of the self. And the concept of the self, for the first time, was addressed by Parmenides. And that concept was in competition, if you want to call it, with the concept of Heraclitus, which is basically that the only constant thing in life is movement. So, on the one hand, we have the concept of the self as like a permanent, steady, unique, infinite element that transcends everything. And on the other hand, we have this concept from Heraclitus that you don't get a bath twice in the same river, for example. So, or fire is the symbol of life, the main symbol of life. So, we already know that, or we can perceive that the concept of who deeply we are is also in conflict. So from the very start of everything is something that we must take into consideration to think anything else. So we have the Greek, we have then the Roman Empire, which in many ways like fed from the Greeks, but it was an empire, so their concerns probably were more into the like a narcissistic view of themselves and the rest of the world surrounding, the ancient world, Mediterranean world surrounding around them, and so on and so forth. And this went up to the creation of the Catholic Church, which was created, in Rome as well, and with Constantine being the first Roman emperor that embraced Christianity. And then for the Catholic Church, they developed the idea of confession, and so basically a way of dealing with the behavior and mental problems, including guilt and all the elements related with your behavior in society and the feeling that you had inside of you were kind of addressed by confession and by the relationship between the Christian and the priest. That was eliminated with Protestantism, and with the conquest of America, and with England becoming a major world power, and everything changed there. Maps, science, Galileo Galilei, and Kepler, and Newton, and everything else, until the 19th century, when we have the moment when psychology was born, which was the work of Wilhelm Wundt. He wrote a book about psychology for the first time, and he called it Principles of Psychological psychology. So from that point on, psychology was like standing on its own right as science or as an attempt to become a science. But as we all know, positivism is like just one eye view of reality, because if you don't have a fact, if you don't have like an element concrete, observable, basically you don't even consider as anything. So Freud started developing his psychology or psychoanalysis from late 19th century, and his basic assumptions were connected with this secular view of us humans, because Europe, the non-Mediterranean Europe, the non-Catholic Europe, the Protestant Europe, Germany, France, England, Holland, etc., they were more involved with Protestantism, and with the idea of grace and not confession, and no church and no father. Basically, it's the elimination of the father or the I, the big brother, because basically that what it was, the church, a big brother. So this is the moment where we have to start rethinking these elements. So Freud started psychoanalysis with the based in the idea of thermodynamics. So the idea of thermodynamic means that it's based in Newton, of course, and it is that they should be the energy, you never lose energy. So basically, this energy is only transformed, and for the same reason, the energy that is moving our body, the energy that is helping to create our thoughts and everything else, sexuality, he defined it as a libido. So this libido became this energy that when it was like misplaced, when it was unbalanced in our bodies, became a problem, and it was the source of all the mental problems, behavioral problems, and etc., etc., etc. So Freud created this psychoanalytic movement, and he has different followers. He had people that believe in him and start practicing the therapy, but mainly psychoanalysis was like a total breakthrough, because they established that we are not just one piece of work, but we are, according to psychoanalysis, we are divided in three different elements, in three different, let's say, forces: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id, the instinctual part; the superego, the cultural part; and the ego, this funny administrator of this constant battle that behind our backs, mostly in our unconscious, these elements are fighting, and the ego is basically the way we behave. So our topic today, it's the self. This is the moment, the beginning of the 20th century, is the moment that the idea of the self it's readdressed, but one of the members of the psychoanalytical movement, from the very inside of the movement, and it was one of the Freud's disciples, Carl Jung. But Carl Jung went into opposition with Freud. So Freud established this relationship, this positivistic relationship, materialistic relationship of all these elements that are constituting ourselves, these three elements I mentioned a second ago. But Jung saw the whole thing under a different light. Although he agreed with psychoanalysis, basically the main element that Jung took from psychoanalysis it's the unconscious. And with the unconscious, one of the things that Jung did not limit the unconscious to a single person, but made like the concept of collective unconscious. So, and this collective unconscious is the kind of like a network that unites all our minds, all the consciousness of the world. So he went, in a way, he went back to the concept of Christianity, traditional Catholicism, in terms that, this kind of adaptation between the person and the totality, which God maybe is the name that they want to give it to that phenomenon. And so, start with a very interesting approach that I think is very relevant, and I want to talk about it in the future, which is the concept of synchronicity. But since the issue here is the ego and the self, we can say that Freud considered the ego as consciousness in terms of realization. Now, you realize something, you are conscious, you are aware of something. And then we have Jung that connects the concept of consciousness with a bigger realm. So consciousness is not only the consciousness of the individual, but it's the consciousness, might be, could be, should be, the consciousness of the world, of the universe. This huge force that, according to Jung, transcendence and connect us and everything. And he did a lot of, he has a really interesting research that you label as an idealistic, but probably we should look at it in a deeper way in the future, because it's really interesting. So we have these two concepts now, which is normally the dichotomy between the secular and the religious or the mystic. So the question now is, what is the self? Is the self is just this interaction between different energies in our body, and the social construct, our relation with the social construct? Or is the self something connected with a consciousness that is not only awareness, that, about understanding what someone is saying, or realizing, the movements of the stars or a cloud in the sky? Or is consciousness is a way of connecting what we are as individuals with something major? And consciousness would be like not only this awareness of being able to work in the world, but also to understand our role in the world, our real nature. And that's a problem. I'm not stating this as a solution. I'm not trying to preach anything, as I said. This is a problem, and I think it's really interesting problem. It's very, very important, because it's also related with human rights.